Joining me today, Dr. Ken Davis, IFBB Pro bodybuilder, author of Holistic Bodybuilding, the Anti-Aging Antidote. They call him the Super Ager. In addition to Michele Use, founder and creator of Ageless and Timeless and host of the Ageless and Timeless podcast, top contributor to Top Doctor Magazine, joining me today. Thank you, Dr. Davis, for joining me, having you on a few times.
Yeah, this is a great time. This is great.
And then, of course, we have a longtime friend all the way from the West Coast out there, Michele Use, joining us from Ageless and Timeless podcast and also top contributor to Top Doctor Magazine. Thank you, Michele, for joining us today.
Thank you, Rob. So happy to join you, and I'm honored to be with you and the IFBB.
The Super Ager. They call him the Super Ager.
Exactly.
So, we'll start with you, Dr. Ken. I know we spoke about this, I think, briefly the last show, but you'll see gracing the cover of Top Doctor Magazine right there, somewhere. Yep, there we go. But I know you had numerous articles in there, very informative. I know the editors loved the articles, as did the readers. But tell us, Super Ager, define Super Ager.
The Super Ager is someone in their, as we're moving on in life, the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even 80s that are still doing their thing and eating properly and working out and training and have a balanced mindset and are very focused, that are performing skills and training and competitions at a later age, realizing that age really is just a number and we can do things at any age if we put our mind to it. And I think it's a great term.
Yeah, and that's also brings me to the point of, I know that both you and Michele know a good friend of mine, Dr. Robert Goldman, of course, founder of the A4M conference. Yeah. Back when he defined this anti-aging movement, of course, chronologically, we cannot change the time factor, the age, but biologically and physiologically, we absolutely can, because you see many of these older people today, 60, 50, 60, 70, that are outperforming the youngers, including the 20s and 30s.
Absolutely.
Dependent upon how they take care of themselves. So, Michele, you have an awesome podcast, and I'm grateful for you joining our staff at Top Doctor, as with you, Dr. Davis, offering, your insights. You are awesome. You have so much to offer in regards to informing people on how to optimize their health, their well-being, mentally and physically, with the phenomenal guests that you bring onto your show. And I'm super excited about the one interview that you just recently did with Jay Campbell, who will be featured on the cover of Top Doctor Magazine coming up in the next week or so. So talk to us about your podcast and share with us some of your insights and words of wisdom from all this knowledge that you've obtained through your podcast.
6 years ago, I'm a real estate developer, career background. And after the downturn, I decided to downsize. And I said, you know what, ask yourself the question you always ask others when you give speeches, which is, what would you do if you didn't get paid? And what's your passion? What's your avocation? And so I had always, from the age of 26, been fascinated and passionate about functional medicine, which at that time was just in its infancy. But I used to have to, I was living in New York City at the time, and I had to go and hunt for health food stores. So there was nothing like Whole Foods or any of that at that time. But anyway, I was very passionate. So in 2019, I started the Ageless and Timeless podcast. And originally it was about everybody, entrepreneurs who were achieving just like Ken just talked about, the Super Agers. But then Muscle and Fitness approached me, thanks to you and Dr. Goldman. So because of the focus on the Muscle and Fitness platform of fitness, I started to do more and more of just pure super agers or health professionals and experts. So I've learned so much, and I've had, from my list of guests, I've had some of the most profound guests that have come on the podcast, and they share their knowledge. So the whole point and mission was to empower others through the expertise and role model of our guests to make change in their lives. And many people I viewed in my experience in the business world were struggling and had no answers. And so I thought this is going to be the venue for people to find answers. And then if they're really proactive, they will take action.
I know that both you and Dr. Davis and I, we all share the same beliefs, especially in regard to functional medicine, the holistic approach. So Dr. Davis, I know you have your book out there. Talk about how things have changed. We'll go back and forth here. We'll start with you, Dr. Davis, on defining holistic and functional medicine and then how it's evolved over the years to more of a conventional practice.
Well, it's interesting because I was just doing I have a concierge service that I do for my patients and practitioners. And I just recorded the other day, and I was remarking about, being in practice. I started practice when I was 24 years old. And I've always I was doing functional medicine back 50 years ago. And there was a mentor that I had. His name was Dr. Ken Brockman, and he was a genius when it came to blood chemistry. So I noticed, though, over the years of how, when we would do blood work back then, you didn't see 85 different tests that were off. And now, because of the state of the world and food, environmental factors, emotion, I'm looking at blood chemistry profiles it's almost like you don't know where to begin. Where do I begin on this blood test to really help this person? The other element is that there's still, although it's changing, I believe, but in my experience, there's still certainly the United States, have been brought up with a medical mentality, meaning that if I'm okay or I don't have a symptom, then I'm okay. And also, many are still reticent about going to have a general checkup or evaluation because I guess that no news is good news, rather than taking action to really, come to understand and enhance their well-being. So, also, most of my patients really don't understand what functional medicine is. They still, and as you know, the lab, people don't understand that they look at a blood test and or the doctor explains to them, well, you're within normal range, and they don't know. And so I explained to them, look, if you have a range, there are pathological ranges and there's functional ranges. And a pathological range, which is established by the labs, can have a blood test come in, let's say the range is 0 to 100 and you come in at 3. Does that really mean that it's normal? So I've had to, over the years, educate people so that there's a pathological range and there's a functional range. And meaning that, and they ask, well, what do you mean by function? The way in which a particular system of the body, an organ or a gland functions. So if the gallbladder is supposed to wake up in the morning, I tell them at 9 o'clock, and it's waking up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we have a little bit of a problem here. So I've had to train them and teach people, first of all, to understand what your blood chemistry means, which most people do not, and also to not be afraid to ask your physicians to explain to you what it is that they find in their test, and many of them don't. So the element of being involved with functional medicine and teaching people to understand what this blood test means, what you can do about it, why it may develop that way is something that I'm still doing.
So how would you simply define in short term functional medicine?
Functional medicine is really the ability to establish, through the use of varying testing modes, which could be blood, urine, saliva, hormonal, to be able to determine the optimal, first of all, range of what that chemistry means, to determine how the function of that system, organ, or gland is it functioning at its optimal particular. And functional medicine is a tool that gives us the ability to understand those functions of organ, gland, and system function.
And then in your book, Holistic Approach, just quickly define, what would people expect in that holistic approach?
Well, I guess I would have to relate it back to my approach.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yep.
Because a lot of people are, it's kind of also when I teach, everybody calls himself a wellness practice or a wellness. So I really ask a lot of my students or doctors that I teach, well, can you really explain to me what wellness is for you? And many of them still come from a basis of those, even in the alternative world, where wellness means that I don't have any symptoms and I'm okay. And that's not really what wellness is. In my model, or our model, again, which I've talked about before here, is that there is a triune model of health. And we are a triune. We're a physical entity that has bones, nerves, blood, organ, tissue, right, structure. But we also have another side of us. We have a mind. We have a mind that thinks, a mind that reasons, a mind that has emotion, a mind that has feeling. And then there's the other component. There's an energy within us. People can call it God, soul, Buddha, nature, essence. But we have to acknowledge that there is an energy within us that's there when the body is functioning, and it's not there when it's not. And we call it the spiritual component. So this triune model of health, body, mind, and spirit, has to be at its optimal component to be able to have optimal health and well-being. People or patients and individuals can have a particular symptom or a condition, and again, in the medical and the alternative world, it's being treated the same. But the origin of the causative of that factor may not be the same. So if there's 1,000 people that have digestive or gut issues, the origin of the cause may not be the same in 300 of them and 400 from. So you have to have a way to evaluate the triangle. Also, as we know, if we have a triangle of well-being, if I distort any angle of the triangle, all the angles are going to change.
So I know, Michele, that you've interviewed many experts and are on the same alignment, so to speak, with the functional approach, holistic approach. So in your interviews and through your knowledge and insights of what you've heard, how would you best describe both the functional and holistic approach?
Well, the simplest way to say it is that functional medicine treats the root cause, and allopathic medicine, traditional Western medicine, treats symptoms. So Ken is absolutely correct. People come in when they have a symptom, and the doctor takes out his prescription pad and writes him a prescription or her a prescription for that symptom, but never really going to what Ken was saying, that body, mind, spirit, to the root cause of what is creating that symptom.
Do you feel, again, to both of you, so I feel today there's many of the conventional doctors are now more inclined to turn towards the functional holistic approach?
I've certainly seen it. I would think you too, Michele, have seen more of a open-mindedness to be able to move into that direction. Personally, from my experience, I feel that a lot of the medical physicians have, first of all, got on the bandwagon and changed their practice because they're mandated on what they can do because the majority of them accept insurance, and the insurance companies are very difficult in reimbursing physicians for what it is that they do. So especially in light of, I know physicians that, well, how can I possibly spend 90 minutes with a patient teaching them about what they should be eating in their diet if I'm going to be mandated by the insurance company to only be paid a certain amount of money? So a lot of the physicians realized that they couldn't practice that way anymore, and that they began to get on the, not all of them. I still have many people that come in with a symptom or a condition, and immediately, as you said, Michele, the physician, and in a way you can't blame them because this is how they were trained, unless they have more of an open mind to say, you know what, maybe there's more that I can begin to be doing. So I think it's changing. I certainly have worked with several physicians that are medical, that were functional medicine.
On a more positive
based.
side.
Yeah,
It's
on a
changing
more
for
positive,
right.
exactly.
Yeah, the growth of A4M, American Academy of Anti-Aging, is a great metaphor for what has happened with the increase in awareness of the integrative or functional medicine approach. So I can remember when I first joined them, there would, well, it started in a garage, as you know, Rob, with Dr. Goldman and Dr. Klatz.
And only 300 doctors were invited. 12 showed up. They just thought they were out of their mind, this whole
Exactly. And the other thing, to Ken's point, when the doctors that became more aware of they really wanted to help the patient, not just give them a pill and send them away, because they were limited to 15 minutes by the insurance requirements. So, you can't, like you said, you can't really blame them because they're mandated by a system that's broken. Our healthcare system is broken.
Sick care.
It's sick care. Exactly. So people that, like, what is it, 7,000 members today of A4M, something like that?
Yeah, beyond that now.
Number.
Yeah, and it's great that you both are advocates of that fellowship. And because as we were just speaking about, that's where you really find the true people that are really influencing the world of wellness, overall wellness. But Michele, like I said, you've interviewed quite some interesting guests there. So with the science of anti-aging and the different research that you've come across through your interviews, what do you find that you think is most interesting?
Oh, that's a big question, Rob.
Or is there some to make it a little easier for you?
Well, first of all, I was going to say that when concierge medicine first began, those doctors that were the pioneers were taking huge risks. And I remember because I talked to a few of them at the time and they thought they would never get a patient. Why would a patient come to them and pay money, up to $1,000 in some cases just for a consult? And then, from there, all the other costs that were, their hourly rate is pretty daunting to some people who have an affordability issue. So I think that in itself was a huge step in the change. And I'm sure Dr. Ken can talk about that because he was in that world of, giving up being a doctor that was under health insurance requirements versus a doctor that could spend those 90 minutes with his patient. So I think that's one big thing. The step was a very entrepreneurial step for a profession that doesn't have entrepreneurship as its backbone. So that would be number one thing. And then the second thing, I think, is just the ability to climb the mountain of basically, resistance. I'm going to give you one example, and he's coming on my podcast tomorrow. And I can talk about him a little more if you want. But Dale Bredesen, Dr. Bredesen, is probably the pioneer in curing Alzheimer's. And he's one of the first ones that went against the medical profession and said Alzheimer's is not caused by beta amyloid. Actually, beta amyloid is the protection against Alzheimer's. So he bucked the system. And by the way, he was the CEO and the founder of the Buck Institute here in Northern California. But he's just one example of so many of the people that I've interviewed or will be interviewing that have basically said, I want to help people. And Dr. Ken can speak to this. This is his passion. He doesn't want someone to leave his office and be worse than when they came in, because now they're taking a drug that maybe, in a crisis situation could be the only resort. But in, looking for alternative ways to cure a problem, not a symptom, could cause side effects. It would mean more drugs are needed.
And then taking care of the problem before the problem actually occurs.
Correct.
So in the biohacking world, again, going back and forth here, because that's, dealing with a lot of these educators at the A4M conference, which is coming up, by the way, for those interested, I believe April 24th to the 26th in West Palm Beach. I highly recommend that you check that out. And I'm talking to physicians, I'm talking to chiropractors, I'm talking to those really interested in seeing what's out there, because it is truly amazing, taking me to the point of biohacking. So, Dr. Davis, start with you. Biohacking, what are some of your top biohacking bits of advice or tips for optimal health? There's so much out there. And then maybe too, and Michele, you could expand on this too with your insights, is to break it down so people understand biohacking, and then what truly is biohacking.
I think I want to throw that to Michele, that question, because there was a period where I said, when you had talked to me about the biohacking conference, I didn't really understand. I never really used that term before. I didn't really understand exactly what it was. So I looked a little bit more about what it was all about. So,
yeah, I think it's just the fact that it's sort of evolved from anti-aging, and it just took the next step.
Well, I think, not to cut you off, Rob, but Dave Asprey, I believe, was the one that coined that term.
Yeah, father of biohacking, right?
Exactly. But it's taken on a new meaning as it's broadened in the exposure to other modalities and protocols. So I can give you a couple of examples if you'd like.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, peptides, probably the darling of I would say right now, the darling other than with stem cells, the darling of the functional medicine world, have become, pretty much a biohack. And there are many people that are involved in peptides, and you can look at A4M members as an example, or just walk the exhibition hall. And, every other booth is selling something to do with peptides. But I actually was lucky enough to meet Dr. Bill Lawrence, who is the representative for the St. Petersburg lab, the lab where Dr. Kavinson, who is probably the father of peptide bioregulators. This is a little different because they're all oral and they are smaller amino acids, because a peptide is an amino acid. So it's natural to the body, but they go into larger units of aminos as you get into the injectables. But Dr. Lawrence, he's a great example of someone who had adversity in his life and then found opportunity by being proactive. He's a great role model. So he had a family history of people that died. Everybody in his family died before they were 73. And he was 73. And he said, he looked in the mirror and he said, I don't want to die. And I don't want to be like the rest of particularly the male members of my family. So he was a real estate developer, just like me. And he started doing research and found that there was this lab in Russia that had been established because of Chernobyl primarily, and also the astronauts, and so that were having unhealthy side effects as a result of their experiences. And so Putin went to Dr. Kavinson and said, I want you to find solutions to this. So peptide bioregulators were born in Russia. So they were held there for 40 years. But anyway, Dr. Lawrence, just going back to the story, he discovered them. And to his credit, he got on an airplane. He went to St. Petersburg, knocked on their door, literally, and they took him in. And he became by this time, by the way, he had gotten his PhD in medical, he just was totally proactive and did all the things that you had to do to show credibility. So anyway, now he has become today basically the symbol of peptide bioregulators in the United States. And they have
Where's he based out of, Michele?
He's out of Atlanta. But I think that's just one example. I could give you many more, but that's one example of a person that took the bull by the horn, so to speak. And, basically, if you want to call it a biohack, I don't know if that would be the term I would use, but it's certainly a modality that is being adopted. And he was on my podcast about a year ago, and he did a slideshow, and he showed the improvements of the people that had been under his clinical trials. And lucky for me, he let me come into his clinical trials. So I'm now a year and a half into it. I have no idea about the outcome yet, because I have to do you do a baseline and then you do a test. You do 2 tests actually about a year and a half later. So I'm ready for the results, but I can tell you they make you feel amazing. And whether it's them or all the other things you do, you hardly ever can pinpoint what's what unless you don't do it and you feel a difference. But he would be one example, I would say, of a biohack. And there
Where
are
can
many,
people find
many
out more
others.
about that, the bioregulator?
Yeah. Well,
Where-
just as a side note, Jay Campbell, who you mentioned earlier, who is going to be on the cover of Top Doctor magazine and will be the subject of my first interview.
I think he also, Michele, I think just mentioned to the listeners, he's, I believe, a 5-time best-selling author, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And he wrote the Bible on testosterone. Now, here's another great example. I shouldn't probably tell this little secret, but he did tell it on my podcast, so it's okay. The reason he began to leave, because he was also in real estate, strangely enough, and he was in Southern California, and he and his wife had a hugely successful real estate business. And one day, and he was playing basketball, and one day he got hit in the you-know-where very seriously and had really bad side effects in the genital area. And that led him to find a doctor who helped him, who was using these testosterone replacement therapy, TRT. That began Jay's journey. So out of adversity comes...
When did that happen, Michele? Do you know?
That was, I think, 30 years ago.
Wow. Do you do TRT, Doc, do you do TRT?
And I have an adjunct of...
But you work with someone?
I have someone in Florida that we work with patients by, virtually down in Orlando area. We do a lot of nutrient support, dietary components, but sometimes when, the patient is in need of more, because I'm not allowed to do that as a,
right.
I have an adjunct that I'm able to utilize.
I know we'll go back to Super Ager, the foundation of anti-aging, or provide some core principles of the Super Ager.
Well, going back, I just wanted to go back primarily to the book, which is what it's all about. It's about really the ability to become a super ager and to be optimally healthy. It's really very simple in a sense, which is a focal point of 3 components, which is strength training, resistance training, diet and nutrition, and you can put a sideline. There's mindset, and then there's cardiovascular exercise. And if that is a priority components that are going to improve the quality of one's life, we believe can certainly extend life and also get someone that's in I call it the car going down the hill mode. There's optimal health, there's wellness, there's corrective care, there's someone in need of intensive care, and then there's degeneration. Through that process, we can put the brakes on, turn the car going up the hill. And
how do you get to one thing I find fascinating, especially now, you have neuroscience out there. People are learning so much about, the brain, the subconscious to conscious, how that works. But in your opinion, I believe much of what you're saying, absolutely, if not all, comes down to having proper mindset and skill. So whether that's developing a new habit and discipline, behaviors, any advice you can give, and Michele, I want you to expand on this also, any advice you can give to someone who really needs to do that change or make those changes to get their mindset right. Take an example, someone who's living a lifestyle of whether it's going out frequently, overindulging in high sugar processed foods. How do you advise them to get into that mindset? What could possibly motivate them to get them to that point?
Well, I think television primarily does a good job of, or attempts to. For example, let's say we've all seen these cigarette stop smoking campaigns on television where they show someone who was a smoker and, and doesn't have...
On their deathbed, amputation.
Which is, the brain's primarily, very simply, its role is to move to pleasure to avoid pain, even if there's a cost factor.
Yeah.
And the thing that I learned a long time ago is that you have to get the brain to a point where it associates more pain in continuing to do something rather than a component, which is why, the brain will move to someone, for example, utilizing alcohol at a large level because it takes them out of pain and moves them to pleasure. Temporarily, but you have to teach them that there's better choices that you can make than that to go to pleasure. So you have to allow, it's like you have to also, I'll come back to that, but also what I've taught my patients is that belief systems are created by evidence that we gather to support the belief system. So, which means that, well, here's my belief, so I'm going to gather evidence to support this So I say, well, if you can change a belief system and have a transformative process in 2 minutes, which a lot of times I've done over the years with my patients.
Have you worked with addiction?
Oh yeah, absolutely. All the time. Food addiction. I had a patient yesterday who is grossly obese, has tried many things to do, but he has a food addiction, and he can't stop. A lot of it's tied to other elements of his life, relating to traumas and issues that he's had.
Do you believe in hypnosis?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Michele, do you believe in hypnosis?
I know it's worked, but I've never actually experienced it, with a firsthand awareness like Dr. Davis has. So, but I do know from reading that it can work, and because it is retraining the mind, right, Dr. Davis?
Yeah, it is. Also, the thing, as we know, is it's always about the practitioner doing it and the capability. It's with anything, the technique works, but is a practitioner qualified and really, knows what he's doing, or she knows.
Do you do any type of hypnosis therapy?
What's a little deeper than it?
So what about mindfulness meditation or visualization?
I've used visualization with people.
Because that goes back to, professional athletes. Back, I remember, way back reading, one of the first times I became aware of it was very young, was Jack Nicklaus, a legendary golfer who would not hit a golf ball until he saw exactly how he was going to swing, the trajectory of the ball, where the ball was going to go, where it was going to land. So he wouldn't take that swinger until he saw that visual right in his mind. And he would rehearse that morning, noon, and night. So do you believe in that power of visualization and mindfulness meditation?
That's another great adjunctive utilization, another technique and procedure that certainly can be, I can apply it to my own component in the journey into competitive bodybuilding. And Frank Zane, as you know, we had Frank on, a great component of visualization techniques with myself to be able to, Frank always told me that he wanted to see me on stage having already won. You've already won. And he would have me visualize myself walking on stage, being in my posing, before I was actually doing it.
But there's a difference between just seeing it, and I agree with what you're saying, the difference seeing it and then to get people to understand it's not just lying down and going through the motions. It's you're actually absorbing yourself into this moment or place where you want to be, your future self. So whether it's, you talk about a competition as you were referring to, or whether it's taking your life to another level in a certain dimension, you have to see it and feel it. So Michele, do you do any of that mindfulness meditation yourself?
Absolutely. And Dr. Ben Hardy is probably one of the fathers of visualization. He wrote the book. It's something about seeing yourself 10 years from now, basically. And what does your future self look like? And so, I use it all the time. And, I always try to visualize in my mind, what do I look like a year from now as I'm doing some of the things that I know are going to create the outcome, just like Dr. Ken said about getting into bodybuilding at age 66 or so, that he had to certainly use his mind awareness to create the outcome that he visualized the outcome to and create the motivation to get where he was going to go. So, what they say, you are what you think. And I really believe that. I listened to Joe Dispenza. I listened to him a lot, and he talks about, your thoughts create your reality.
Yeah, I think people have to understand really, and people that really want change in their life, whatever level it might be, they have to really start to dive into how does the brain function. We know that it's 95% is coming from your subconscious mind, which is amazing to me. And 5% is your conscious. So, you should be doing something consciously that is the correct thing. But then you have that battle going on internally, creating that friction of how do you get a grip on that? Michele, to extend that a little bit further, the mindfulness meditation, how long do you practice and how often?
Well, before I answer that question, Roy, I just want to add one thing, that biochemistry of the brain, also, as Dr. Davis will tell us, it has a huge influence, and your genetics. So you don't, you're not bound by your genetics, but if you have, let's say, a genetic predisposition to low dopamine or low serotonin, and you haven't done any mind exercises or any other protocols to affect that shortage, it's like, your brain it's all wiring. It's neurons. And
that's
neurons.
also a trauma factor, right? Something of trauma.
Correct.
In your past, yeah.
Well, and stress, there's so many influences that can be negative, but there's also many that can be positive, but that's where the mind-body awareness and the mindfulness that you were talking about, Rob, comes into play. Is visualization being a big one, and PMA, positive mental attitude.
I think people have to change. Yeah, they have to change. If you can't get your mind, you have to get your mind right in order to get your life right. So that's why I always, even when I was doing the martial arts, it was always, so much more than, obviously the body, so much more than your mind and body. It's like, it's a spirit, it's mind, body, and spirit. And I love that analogy of it's like a triangle. You have to tie that piece together in order for it to make it work. And you have to pay attention to all those things. So if you have that little triangle, what are you going to do for your body today? Whether it's eat healthy, work out, exercise, what are you going to do for your mind today to empower your mind? And then spiritually, whatever your belief is, in my case, God, going to that spiritual place that's going to bring you peace and free of anxiety. Because I think a lot of people are seeking, at the end of the day, what they really are seeking is happiness, peace, joy, contentment. And it's very difficult, especially in today's world.
I would like to say, I like to give the 2 systems or techniques that I've used with my patients, if it's okay.
Sure.
One of them is an NLP or neuro-linguistic programming. So one of the questions I'll ask people, if there were no rules and you couldn't fail at it and money wasn't an issue, what's your dream? Business and personal. So I'll have them do their business life and I have them write it down. And I said, dream, you can make it any way you want. Remember, you can't fail at it. There's no rules and money's not an issue. It could be any way you want it to be. So I said, I want you to write it out. It could be 20 pages. Once you're done, put it away for 3 days, take it out again, make any changes you want. And they do. I said, okay, have you done that? Yep, I did that. Okay, here's part 2. What I want you to do, I want you to rate here's the next question, part 2. Who would I need to be or become to have the dream? And they say, well, what do you mean, Dr. D, by that? Well, maybe I'd have to cut my hair. Maybe I'd have to walk taller. Maybe I'd have to dress different. Maybe I'd have to meditate more. And I have them list all those things that they'd have to be. Then 2A, I say, okay, now that you have that, I want you to rate it on a scale of 0, -10 to +10 on where, so let's say they listed 15 items. I'd have to walk better. I have them rate it. So then after they're done with that, I have them take about 3 or 4 of them because the brain cannot accept going from a -10 in confidence to a +10, but it can accept going from -10 to a -6 of what -6 would feel like. And then, okay, are you at -6? Yeah, there. I said, see if you can take yourself to -3.
This is through a meditative
It's
practice.
kind of a visual component to see themselves. But it makes miraculous changes in somebody because they can get themselves to where the brain can adopt and move to that to really see the change happening in them. Also, one question I ask people too, usually on my new patient component, I ask them, I want you to rate on a scale of 0 to 10, the level of joy that you feel when you get up in the morning, the first thing. I'm not talking about the joy you have for your husband or your wife or your kids.
Just life.
The joy of life of can't wait to move. And many people.
Oh, they don't want to get out of bed. They don't want to get out of bed.
A lot of them are too.
Just has to get out of bed. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's nothing to drive them. Purpose.
I tell people too, if you remember, you may remember this. I said, you have to have a vision quest.
And I love that movie too.
Thank you. That's what I was going to.
I love that movie.
Yeah, the shoot. You got to beat the shoot.
Got to shoot. Classic. Well, we have a couple more minutes, Michele. I just want to talk about your podcast. I highly recommend and suggest. I believe you have a podcast also now, Doc.
I'm starting a podcast with Marty Gallagher. Marty's the one I wrote the book with. It was Very interesting fellow.
Yeah.
Yes.
So look out for that. Two legends, as well as, of course, Michele. She is just killing it on all levels with these amazing interviews with amazing people. And again, very grateful for your contributions to Top Doctor Magazine. But you have Ageless and Timeless podcast, but the website is ageless and spelled out AND timeless.com. And then also you have your Instagram at Ageless and Timeless. And then where can people find your podcast, Michele? On the normal platforms, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes?
I have a YouTube channel. So it's just Ageless and Timeless with Michele Use, I think is, I don't know what the hashtag is, but if you just type that in the search bar, it would come up, and Ageless and Timeless by itself comes up, and the with Michele Use only gets it a little closer, because I guess there are a couple of phantom websites now using that name, not surprisingly. But anyway, yeah, so that's how YouTube channel on my website itself.
We're all trying to jump on your bandwagon, Michele.
I guess, I don't know. I get that imitation is the best form of flattery, correct, Rob? That's what they tell me. So
that's
okay.
right. And I also want to point out to make sure to check out her articles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, I just want to make one point clear. Gratitude, and sure Dr. Ken wanted to say this in all that he was doing with his patients, but showing gratitude is one of the strongest emotions that we can have in our life. That and love. Those are my two biggest in terms of being thankful for what you have, count your blessings, not your troubles, and basically just loving life, because what's the alternative? So I always say, and Rob, you and I have talked about this, our mantra is never give up. So no matter what challenges come your way, it's your spirit and your thankfulness for what you have and your belief in yourself. The self-confidence factor is huge. And I see that too in even personal relationships. So I just wanted to, add that into what Dr. Davis said.
Thanks, Michele.
Also, too, Rob, I just want to mention, you were mentioning podcasts. Thanks to this gentleman over here, we do, as of Rob know, I've done a bunch of podcasts on our muscle and fitness channel.
Yep.
I've done some recent ones with IFBB Pro, very fascinating, and other things on endocrine health, hormonal health, things like that. So it's another place where people can check it out.
Well, make sure you check out Top Doctor Magazine. Make sure you check out Michele Lewis, Ageless and Timeless podcast, and follow Dr. Ken Davis's journey here. Keep your ears and eyes open for his podcast with Marty Gallagher. I'm very thankful. Speaking of thankful and gratitude, I'm very thankful for the both of you for joining me today. And again, look out for Michele's awesome article coming out in the next issue of Top Doctor Magazine with the icon himself, Jay Campbell. Michele, Dr. Davis.
And may I also say one other thing, Rob? Sorry. But
Sure.
Dr. Davis is coming on my podcast in August. So we're going to have a little get together there as well. So just wanted to put that in there.
I shall be on ours also. I'm just working a date.
It's awesome having everyone do their thing. I think the more of us that are out there providing this information, I always say read, watch, listen, learn, reinforce, apply, try. That's basically what it comes down to. So Michele, thank you very much. God bless you. God bless you, Dr. Davis. And God bless all of you. Make sure you don't just listen to this podcast. You should come out and take your notes. We had a wealth of information here, wisdom, experience from both Michele and Dr. Davis. I hope you do apply it to your own life. And remember, it all starts with the right mindset, your attitude, and gratitude.